Today I wanted to talk about songwriting from a perspective of someone who's not primarily a songwriter. A couple of years ago, my friend Kendrick and I, who I write songs with, wrote a song called "The One I Miss." That song is being played under the video right now, so that's the one. And it was very interesting to go into a world that I'm not comfortable with. I can write melodies, but I can't really sing it. I am not a singer. And that's where Ken is really powerful at. He's a very good singer and he really can write powerful melodies. So it was very interesting to work in that field and that dynamic. Writers usually tend to write alone, and I thought I'd share some of what I learned and how I applied what I learned to other forms of writing. So The One I Miss I wrote with Kendrick a couple of years ago, and it was a straightforward breakup song from the perspective of a guy. So now we have a premise. The premise is that the girl has left the guy, and now he has to deal with the after effects of that. So the premise was simple, and we just had to fall through with it. It was interesting to feel really confined in that headspace, because when you're writing prose in like short stories or novels, you can describe a feeling in multiple lines and paragraphs and even chapters. And same thing with poetry, I would say. You can fit a feeling in a couplet or a whole stanza if you want, 4 lines. But when you're writing songs, you don't have that kind of space or that leisure to really blow up and go out. The audience gets bored, and you as a player gets bored as well. Like, if you ever heard a love song that sounds sappy, it's because of that. And that's what we learned early on when Ken and I were writing The One I Miss. So for that, we really had to paint a premise and show the listener that there was more to the song than just a heartbreak. So we started with the premise, we talked about that, we started with the feelings and the drawbacks, and we really tried to push in the point that we're feeling sad in this moment because a loved one has decided to leave us. Writing choruses was a whole different task. When you're writing a chorus, you want to write something that's catchy, and that's why a chorus is also called the hook, because it hooks the listener in. That was difficult to do, especially when you're writing a typical 4-chord song. It's been done so many times before that you don't want to tread on trodden paths. That's where Ken came in with his powerful vocals and his really grasp on melody, which is something that I lack. It was very interesting to see how that dynamic works. Once we had the chorus in and we were happy with it, it was really hard to fill in those numbered syllables that you have with this melody line that we had. Once we had everything in place, the song fell through in like about 15 to 20 minutes. But it was just going from point A to point B to C to D that took its time. And then once I took that information and applied it to my writing, the one thing that I learned was that my dialogues were suddenly a lot smaller and to the point. So I think that's the number one takeaway that I would take from writing songs, is that because writing songs is such a first-person visceral experience, you realize that when you're writing prose, dialogues don't have to sound like how dialogues sound when you're talking in real life. So that really helped drive the word count lower when I was writing dialogues. If I wanted to say something that would take 2 lines to say, I'd find a way to say it in 1 line, just like writing music. It's a very interesting concept. If any of you guys are writers out there who are slightly musically inclined, I would really recommend writing songs, because you'd find a lot of utility in that art. It's a very confined space. You can't vomit words out like you would in, let's say, prose or even poetry, and you can cut it down. You have to be very concise. You have an X number of syllables that you have to play with, and you have an X number of melody lines that you can play with. There isn't a lot of leeway with that, and I think that's very powerful for writers who write a lot. I thought that would be an interesting experience to share. I hope you guys really benefited from it, because I did. And thank you very much. Until the next video, I'll see you guys soon. Nazar out.